Good morning and thanks for hosting us.
Mr. Nkosi, as you would have heard there, one of the trending topics this morning speaks specifically to what was found by the Ethics Committee in the case of Dr. Zweli Mkhize, and people basically grappling, with the understanding of what constitutes conflict of interest, and I suppose more importantly, how your committee arrived at its final determination. So please, if you can walk us through it. The first part, for example, that dealt with the relationship between the former health minister and his son, and it concluded that the son that is a married adult, and therefore, as I understand it, but please feel free to correct me, not a close family member as defined in Parliament's Code of Conduct, because he is said to be financially independent as an adult. So what is a family member according to the code?
Good morning, Sakina. The committee bases its decisions on the Code of Conduct, as we have correctly indicated. The Code of Conduct defines a family member, a close family, as a spouse, a permanent companion, or a dependent. Based on the evidence that we received from Dr. Zweli Mkhize and all people involved, the committee determined that on the basis of the definition, the son is not in a dependent relationship between himself and Dr. Zweli Mkhize. And that therefore meant that we do not have to go further and determine any other thing related to the first matter. And please remember that in our code of ethics, we are bound only by this ethic and not any other matter. The complaint was that the son received a benefit from DigiVibes that may be construed to have been a benefit as a result of his dependent relationship with his father, Dr. Zweli Mkhize. For us, the evidence that had come before us from affidavits from Dr. Zweli Mkhize, where he outlined his relationship with the son and declared that there is no dependent relationship between the two. That convinced us that there is no breach on his side. That doesn't mean that other authorities responsible for investigating, for example, whether there was criminality or otherwise in this matter, cannot find otherwise.
So if we look at the developments yesterday with regard to the SIU and the 5 new entities that they will now go after to recover funds from, one of those would include an entity that is linked to the wife of the former minister. So what does that mean for you and the work that you've done? Because you have been criticized even within your ranks of looking very narrowly at the rules.
Yeah, the complaint that came from us from Honorable Kharube did not allege a relationship of the spouse. It confined itself to the son, and that is what narrowed us in our investigation in relation to the son. We cannot investigate something that is not before us because our rules don't allow us to do so. If we were to do that, it would stretch and it would be found wanting. And therefore, Honorable Kharube requested us to investigate this particular issue involving Dr. Zweli Mkhize and the son, and did not go to the spouse. So we didn't have a jurisdiction to investigate the spouse, but only confined ourselves to the son.
So what does this mean for the committee's work now that there have been further developments?
On our side, the matter is concluded. Remember, we do not make criminal investigations. Our investigations relate only to the matter of a possible existence of or actual existence of a conflict of interest in relation to the member over whom we have jurisdiction. From our side, it is closed. We have said in our conclusion that even if we find that there is no discretion, law enforcement agencies responsible for criminal investigations continue to do their work in relation to this matter, and we will not hinder them. So as far as ethical conduct is concerned, we did find, but we will not impede the SIU, the Hawks, and any other institution, judicial institution charged with that responsibility to continue with their investigations. It should be remembered also that the investigations by the SIU precedes the tabling of the complaint to our committee, and we therefore have not interfered with them, but considered only what Honorable Kharibe brought to us.
So, with regard to the criminal investigation, you're absolutely right. However, as an entity that is seized with looking at the conduct, the ethics of members of parliament, what exactly is your scope of work? And also, what, according to your code, constitutes conflict of interest?
Our scope, firstly, our jurisdiction is on our members. Our scope extends to, firstly, that members of parliament are required to disclose any potential or existing code of conduct between themselves and third parties, including their immediate family members defined in the code. Those should be declared in two parts, in the public and the private or confidential sections of the disclosures. They are also required in this regard to be specific about the nature of the relationships. Do they hold directorships? Do they hold shares? Are they involved in business, etc.? And it requires that where we take decisions that involves a possible or potential conflict of interest, this should be declared. And any breach of these can be brought to us by any member of the public or initiated by ourselves to investigate if there is a breach, like in this instance where we did, and in many other instances when we did. And we are directed in terms of the code to follow a particular procedure to solicit information in the forms of affidavits, evidence that points to a breach. And that is our brief, and to report that to the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces.
So, pardon me, but with regard to conflict of interest, what exactly constitutes a conflict of interest for parliamentarians?
I will speculate on this issue and use myself an example. If in terms of the code, I participate as a director of a company that is involved in business with government, I have to declare that. I have to disclose that. Even in holding shares in private companies that may not even be doing business with government, I have to declare that. That constitutes actual conflict of interest where I do not declare that. It constitutes so where I am required to do so, but I do not disclose.
So I'm still just slightly at sea here, Mr. Nkosi. So explain to us in this specific case involving Dr. Mkhize as an example. So you explained to us the issue around his son, but in terms of disclosure to Parliament, if, for example, your wife, Mr. Nkosi, is somehow a beneficiary of a business somewhere that you have sight over in one way or another as a parliamentarian, does that constitute a conflict of interest?
It does. And if it is in my knowledge that she, as a spouse, is involved in that, I have a responsibility to declare. If it is not in my knowledge and she conducts those businesses, there is potential. And therefore, once it comes to my knowledge, there is a responsibility to declare.
So let me ask it more specifically then in terms of what transpired yesterday with the SIU and also with regard to your mandate as the committee responsible for ethics oversight. So given what has happened with the SIU yesterday, I spoke to Kaiser Khanyago, who was very clear about the links, monies paid to certain companies and who owns those companies. What will you be doing now as the Ethics Committee? Will you go back and yourself proactively investigate, or do you expect someone, a member of Parliament or the public, to bring that matter to you once more?
We in terms of what happened yesterday with the SIU, we have said that we will not impede their processes. But as far as we are concerned, if anybody comes to us now to lay a complaint on this matter, we're duty bound. I mean, we're bound to investigate it in details, material to it.
Does that mean that you have exhausted your avenues on this matter, Mr. Nkosi? Because, and I used that yesterday's example specifically, and I asked you about conflict of interest as far as spouses are concerned. And yesterday, the SIU were very clear that there were companies involved that were directly linked to the wife of the former health minister. So are you still contending that you have exhausted your work in this regard?
Yes, Sakina, remember the issue that was brought to us was brought in relation to the son. And
yes, but I asked you previously, specifically, Mr. Nkosi, whether you are now going to wait again for an outside member of, rather a member of Parliament or someone outside of Parliament to bring another matter before you as the Ethics Committee, or whether you will proactively go back to look at this matter.
We can do both. A member of the public can bring this to us, and then we'll investigate it. And out of our own initiative, sitting in committee, we can say we are now considering what the SIU has said. Is there a reason for us to proceed and make initiate an investigation, and that we can do?
So just as a matter of interest, out of curiosity, how many members of Parliament have you found to be in breach of parliamentary ethics code in the last 2 years?
There have been several of them. In terms of disclosures, I think in 2019, 2020, we have found that people have disclosed late, and I think the number ranged from between 10 to 15. It reduced in 2020, 2021, and in 2021 to 2022, it reduced further. We have also found that certain members have breached the conduct in terms of their public utterances, or they are actions at the public level, and we've communicated that to them. And we've also found in other instances that there has not been a breach, and we've communicated these to those members. Our report in relation to breaches have been tabled in the last financial year. I think at the closing of at the last meeting of the National Assembly in 2021.
Well, we'll leave it there for this morning. Thanks so much, Chairperson of the Ethics Committee in Parliament, speaking to us about the Code of Ethics that cleared former Health Minister Dr Zweli Mkhize of any wrongdoing in the matter relating to digital vibes. Now,